Right, so I've actually got some good news here now. I've separated the wires. There was only 3 wires that I actually needed off of this switch, and that is these two, these ones just here. Now these 3 here is so that's the or neutral, or whatever you might call it. That's the one that joins either of these 2 switches. Now red switches on for forward, black switches on for reverse. So I've wired this up into this plug socket here rather crudely just to test, and as you can see when I show you a little test here. Right, so if I turn it to reverse and then press the accelerator now, and then if I turn it into forward using the car switch, that is our success. So now all I have to do is wire up those wires up to there, and I can use these switches right here. I don't know how to get this E1 working. I can't seem to find a continuity in the plug to make economy work. I'm not sure what it is, or why it's not working on this dial here. But it's not a huge problem. What I would have loved to do was to connect regen to here, so that I could theoretically attach regen to E and turn it off for there, which is what I might attempt to do. We'll see how it goes. And yeah, so really good news, that's all functioning. And yeah, so there's only one more thing I need to figure out with this wiring, and that is, without this one connected here into here, the car won't switch on. It's like basically a neutral safety for the car switching on, so I need to figure out what happens there. So I was going to wire up the accelerator, not the accelerator, the drive switch, and then I just had a thought. This car is wired in such a weird way, without the 48 volt connected. There's something in the way now that's not giving me any 12 volt dash. Now I've got the normal 12 volt working, like your lights and your hazard lights, etc. But you cannot operate the indicators or anything like that without the 48 volt side connected somehow. So what I've got to figure out is where this relay or bridge or whatever is that's making that switch on automatically. I've got to figure out what that is and where it is. Now there was a relay under here, I'm not sure if that's anything to do with it. It was down in here somewhere. Where did it go? There we are. Now there is a relay under here, so I wonder if that's anything to do with the dash not working. I'll have to find out some information and see if I can resolve this first, because that's a shame. Because I think the problem here as well is that I've got to make sure that if I do connect the 48 volts, it's not going to be running live through here where you connect the drive switches, because that seems to be connected to this, and it was running the full voltage of the battery through it before when I checked it, when it was all hooked in normally. So I've got to be careful that using these drive switches, if I use them instead of using the original switch over there, I've got to make sure that I'm not running high voltage through those wires, because I'm going to damage them otherwise. So that's the tricky part. However, I think it might be okay. When I was testing it before, I had 12 volt running through it from here, but I don't think that kind of works, because I think this needs to be 48 volts in order to activate. So I've just got to go and wire this up a slightly different way and see if I can get it to function otherwise. So yeah, bear with me. I'm going to have a little look at this and see what I can recreate. Right, so sadly I've had to wire this back up into this switch, because whilst it would have been amazing to use this, there's a slight problem that once this is hooked up to 12 volt and grounded to the chassis, that live wire for the main return just here, that was live at 60 volts off those batteries. So that's going to be a problem in terms of wiring up the drive switch over there, sadly. But I've also got another problem, is that I need to run a 48 volt battery in here in order to... We need to run a 48 volt battery in order to get the dash working. So I'm just as well keeping the 48 volt separate and running the dash as planned, and then that way I've got the 48 volt heater and everything and all that kind of stuff going. So yeah, I've just got to figure that out. And so I guess in the end I didn't have to do all of that, because I'm going to be wiring everything into that center console instead. So yeah, but that's the joy of just testing things, trying to get things working. Plans that you may have to change just to, in order to get this car functional to the simplest degree without having to pull that whole dash apart, which in the future may be a project, but for now I just want to get this car running. So yeah, that's going to be the plan, is to do what I originally suggested and put a center console in there with the switches. Right, so it's a bit crude, but I've basically gotten these switches fixed into the center console, so that it's the original center console for the heated seats. But what I can do in the future is to build a proper interface into this, cut it out and then screw a proper interface in where these will sit properly. But for the time being, that's perfect. They're exactly in the right place. So there we go. That's all solidly in place in there, and now I have access to power saver, regen and forward and reverse where the original heated seat console was. So the wires are just coming out the back here, and all I've got to do now is I've cut this off of one of the key switch, or one of the flap that I won't need anymore for the charger. That operated the flap at the side of the car. Actually, that was for turning the car on, but I don't really need that anymore. So, thinking about that, that might be why the contactor switch wasn't actually engaging, because I hadn't connected that back together. Oh, too late. I may have just shot myself in the foot there. But without that connected to the 48 volts, that was actually the ignition switch for the 48, so that you could operate this key switch and the contactor. Damn. Okay, that would have given me an option for powering the, because I'm using 48 volts now, I could have hooked that up to the old contactor and put 12 volts onto the top of the contactor. So yeah, I just kind of did something I didn't want to do there, now that I think about it. And I've cut it quite short to the wiring loom, so I don't think I'll be able to rectify that situation. Oh well. Yeah, so all I've got to do now is to wire up these here to the reverse lights, and that will give me my reverse. That will give me my reverse light when I switch on reverse on this car. on that switch. So yeah, I've just got to do that, and then the rest should be pretty simple, just wiring it back into the back. And that is our center console just about finished. Right, so I've made some progress. What I've done is connected the white and black wire back to the positive, and that does seem to act like a key switch. So now what I need to figure out is where I can find a 12-volt feed in here that I can connect up to the 12-volt switch on here, because if you watch this now, I have ignition, the ignition key works. So all I need to do is to find a 12-volt circuit that switches on, that I can get to, and if I can wire that up to the 12-volt circuit in here, then I will have the ability to switch on the controller via the ignition, and then I can just leave the inverter on all the time. Not the inverter, the DC to DC converter. That will be going from the 120 volts into the dash, and whenever I turn the ignition key, it will switch the inverter on back here. So progress. Right, so I think that's almost all I'm going to get done for today. So what I've done is fixed all of this into place here, so that can switch everything on as I need to. If I turn the dash on, if I turn this on here, oh, it's not connected at the 12 volt, but and then I do this, that basically turns on the 12 volt to the rear of the car, and this comes in here, and that connects to the 12 volt, which starts up this little box here. The other wire is grounded, and then we also have this wire here which connects into the reverse switch. So when that's connected, that should turn on the reverse, lights also. I just realized there is one more thing I do have to do actually, and that is to do something with this cable here, because that ground is still grounded, so that will have to be cut, and then that grounded wire will have to be fed into it will probably have to fed into this one here. So that's what we're going to need to do, is we're going to need to feed the other ground wire into here, and then that will turn both of the lights on when the car goes into reverse. So that's kind of almost done. That's got the accelerator and the drive switch all plugged in, and then all I've got to do is to wire up the 12 volt to the inverter, and I need to get a 48 volt battery in just to go onto that. Yeah, then we should be almost good. So that's probably another job for another day, is tidying all of this up, putting some cable ties in, and then hopefully getting it off the ramp and giving it a test drive. But as soon as all of this is tidied up round the back and I don't need to get in here anymore, I need to get some battery connectors as well before I can wire up the batteries. So yeah, we've got a couple more jobs to do, but after that we should be ready for testing. So that's all for today, and I'll keep you posted as things progress a little further.